I'd just found out I was the newest Mega Millions millionaire, and I flew home to surprise my wife. But before I even made it up the stairs, I heard muffled laughter upstairs, a familiar whisper, and one sentence that turned my blood to ice. He doesn't suspect a thing. In that moment I realized the jackpot hadn't just given me luck. It had handed me a weapon. Before we jump in, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next stories, hit like to help this reach more people, and comment where you're watching from, your city and state, or your country if you're outside the US. I truly love seeing how far these stories travel. My name is Frank Miller. I'm 64 years old, and if you'd asked me what my life looked like before that Thursday, I would have told you it was a life without surprises. Same early wake-up, same strong coffee, same newspaper on the table, same news channel replaying the same tragedies like the world enjoyed testing people's patience. I worked 36 years at Summit Tool & Die in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I started on the floor, hands full of grease, body learning how to carry the weight of a long day. And I retired as a shift supervisor, proud of my badge, and proud I'd never cheated anyone. I never got rich, never drove the newest truck on the block, but I paid my bills, raised my kids, and kept my name clean. I was the kind of man people call boring, until they realize stability is a luxury most folks never get. Diane and I got married when I was 26. She was 24, and back then her smile felt like a promise that would last a lifetime. We had 2 kids. Ethan, who lives in Phoenix now with his wife and 2 boys, and Melissa, who settled in Providence, Rhode Island, and always jokes that cold weather makes people better mannered, which I still haven't been able to prove. They call on special dates. They visit when they can. And I learned not to complain because that's what happens when your kids grow up. You raise them for the world, and then the world gets them. When I retired 4 years ago, I honestly thought Diane would be happy. In my mind, I'd finally be there, company for her, help around the house, fixing everything we always said we'd do one day, breathing without a clock hanging over my head. But reality didn't match that dream. Diane started saying I was underfoot, that I made too much noise, that I asked too many questions, that I was disrupting her routine. Routine. She used that word like I was a piece of furniture shoved into the wrong corner. She said I needed hobbies, that I needed to get out, that I needed to stay busy. And I believed her. I understood it, at least partly. She'd had the house to herself for decades while I worked, and suddenly I was there all day, every day with my organized old man habits, opening curtains at the same time, stacking dishes a certain way, wanting to talk. So I tried to adjust. I joined a bowling league on Wednesday nights. I started fishing on Lake Michigan on weekends with a group of retirees who debated bait like it was national policy. I started walking at a nearby park and waving at strangers like we lived in some small town where everybody still knew your name. I was trying, honestly trying. And in the middle of all that, there was Ray Caldwell. Ray had been my best friend since we were teenagers. Not bar buddies, life buddies. We grew up near each other, worked side jobs together, shared tools, shared secrets, shared long silences. Ray was the best man at my wedding. And when he lost his job years back, I loaned him money without charging interest, because to me, friendship was simple. You help, and that's it. Ray had that big, loud, charismatic energy. Walks into a room and heads turn. Diane used to say Ray was like a brother to us, and like a loyal fool, I agreed. The day that changed everything started out ordinary. Diane told me early that she was driving to Lansing to spend the afternoon with a cousin and catch up. She kissed me quick on the cheek, grabbed her purse, and was out the door before I'd even finished my coffee. I stood at the window and felt that quiet, gentle emptiness that comes when you think everything's normal. Around noon, I decided to fill up my truck. I pulled into a gas station on a busy road, wedged between a tire shop and a little convenience store that sold everything: burnt coffee, dry sandwiches, and hope in the form of lottery tickets. While I was paying, I saw the bright sign, Mega Millions Jackpot, $9.4 million. I'd never been a gambler. Diane always called the lottery a tax on dreamers. I even laughed along. But in that moment, I can't explain it. Something in my gut said, buy one, just one. Not because I expected to get rich, but because it felt like a small act of freedom, a tiny rebellion against all those years of, we can't, not now, maybe later. I bought a ticket, let the machine pick the numbers, tucked it into my wallet, and walked out without even thinking about it. 3 nights later, I was alone in the kitchen with the TV low, eating toast and spreading butter like it was a ritual. The anchor read the winning numbers. My heart did something strange, one of those beats your body feels before your mind understands why. I grabbed the ticket, checked once, twice, 4 times, and I started sweating. I thought I was reading it wrong. I turned the volume up, checked again. It was real. I'd won $9.4 million, and the first thing I felt wasn't joy. It was panic. Pure panic. My hands shook so hard I thought I'd rip the paper. I sat down and just breathed for a few minutes like I'd run a marathon inside my own kitchen. Then the joy arrived. But even that joy felt weird, like a wave that couldn't decide if it was safe or dangerous. I laughed alone, half-choked laughter like someone who can't believe what's happening. And then I thought of Diane. I thought of all the times she said, life's passing and we haven't lived. All the time she talked about seeing the southern coast, about having a little place near a quiet beach, about traveling, about doing something just once in our lives, without checking the price tag. I pictured myself telling her, hugging her, surprising her. For a few minutes I was the simple hero in a simple story, the husband who finally gives his wife the dream. I slipped the ticket into an envelope, hid it in the inside pocket of my jacket, grabbed my keys and drove home with steady hands and a racing chest. But when I turned onto my street, I saw something that didn't belong in my fantasy. Ray's truck parked in my driveway like it was his. I didn't question it at first. Ray stopped by sometimes. Too often, looking back. But I called it friendship. I parked on the street, quiet, because in my head I was about to surprise both of them. Guess what? We hit the jackpot. It almost makes me laugh now, remembering how naive that thought was, like life is some cheerful commercial. The moment I closed the front door, I heard it. Laughter upstairs. Not Diane's normal polite laugh from the living room. This was short, muffled, intimate, like someone was trying to hide it in a pillow. I froze on the first step, my body locked up before my brain would accept what my ears were picking up. Then Ray's voice came, low, playful in a dangerous way. How much longer are you going to make me wait, Di? And Diane answered with a breathy sigh I'd never heard directed at me. Relax. It's moving. He's predictable. I just need him signing a few things and then it's over. Predictable. That word hit me hard. That's how she saw me, a predictable man. Then Ray said something that tightened my throat. You promised you'd get out of that house. I'm drowning, Diane. She laughed and said, you know I'm not walking away with nothing. Frank will pay without even noticing. He trusts you. He trusts me. It's almost sad, but useful. Useful. The word echoed in my head like a hammer. I moved up one more step without meaning to, like a child trying to confirm a nightmare. I heard the soft creak of a bed, a rustle of clothing, and then Diane said like it was some romantic confession. I've spent years pretending. You're my real life. Ray answered something about it being too many years. I didn't catch the exact number because my ears started ringing. I just know that in that moment I felt old in a way I'd never felt before. Not the age of my body, but the age of disappointment. I didn't yell. I didn't slam a door. I didn't charge upstairs. I did something I didn't even know I could do. I smiled. A small, dry, almost elegant smile. Because suddenly I understood that bursting in there would be a gift to them. I pictured myself shaking, the betrayed husband, and them looking at me with pity or anger, calling me crazy, flipping the script. No. I backed down the stairs in silence, walked out like I'd forgotten something in the truck, got behind the wheel, and sat there staring ahead, breathing like I was trying not to die. I cried yes. I cried in a way I hadn't cried since my father's funeral. I cried for time, I cried for the trust I'd handed over like house keys. I cried for my best friend. I cried for myself, because I truly believed love was something you could earn just by doing everything right. Then the crying stopped and a strange calm took its place. Cold, clear, the way winter silence fills the world when it finally settles in. I thought about the envelope in my jacket, $9.4 million, and I thought, if I tell her now, I'll be financing the end of my own life. If I tell her now, I become the ATM for my own emotional funeral. I started the truck and drove with no destination for a while. That night, I went to Providence, where my daughter Melissa lived. I texted Diane an excuse. An old co-worker from the plant was sick and had asked to see me, and I'd be gone overnight. Diane replied fast. No questions. Like she was used to me disappearing when it suited her. When Melissa opened the door and saw my face, she didn't need a story. She just stared at me and said, "Dad, what happened?" I stepped inside, sat on her couch, and when I tried to talk, my voice broke. I told her everything I'd heard, except the lottery. Not yet. I needed to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. Melissa held me the way she did when she was little, and I came home exhausted from work. Her eyes filled with tears, but her jaw tightened with anger. Melissa's an attorney. Contracts, corporate disputes, that world. And she has a mind that, when it's hurt, turns pain into folders and deadlines. When I finished, she took a deep breath and said, "We're going to do this the right way. No scene, no mistakes, no chance for them to twist it back on you." That's when I told her about the ticket. Her expression changed from shock to focus, like someone flipped on a light. The next morning, she was already talking about protecting the winnings, keeping it separate, keeping it quiet, planning every step. She explained, patiently, that big money isn't just a blessing. It's a magnet for trouble. And when there's betrayal, it's gasoline. We moved quietly. I signed what needed to be signed with proper legal guidance, and the prize was claimed through a protective setup designed to keep my name out of the spotlight and, most importantly, out of Diane's reach. After taxes and fees and decisions I didn't even know existed, it came out to a little over $6 million. It was more money than a man like me ever expected to see. And that was exactly why I couldn't act like an amateur. Melissa told me, "Now we need proof. Real proof. Not just your word." Through her professional contacts, she pointed me to a private investigator, a former cop named Grant Heller, who specialized in infidelity and domestic fraud. I used to think hiring an investigator was something people did in movies. I learned it's something desperate people do when they're trying to survive with their dignity intact. In less than 3 weeks, Grant handed me a report that made me sick. Diane and Ray had a routine, almost religious, meeting at a roadside motel near Kalamazoo on 2 specific days every week, for years and years. The cousin in Lansing was a script, and it wasn't just that. Call records, dated photos, receipts, patterns. Worse, Grant found financial moves that didn't make sense. Diane had been pulling money from our joint account in small amounts for years, like stealing in a whisper. Then the amounts grew. She'd opened an account under her maiden name using an old relative's address and had stashed over $180,000. Money that wasn't hers, money I'd worked for. And as if that weren't enough, there were documents with my signature. Signatures I didn't recognize because they weren't mine. Diane had forged paperwork tied to a line of credit against our home. I'd always been proud to say, "My house is paid off." It wasn't. There was a second mortgage I never authorized, and where did that money go? Part of it went to something that made my stomach turn, a small vacation condo in Gulf Shores, Alabama. A beautiful beach place, exactly the kind of spot Diane used to talk about wanting for us to relax. It wasn't for us. It was for them. And Ray was drowning in debt. He'd tried to launch a renovation business that failed, and now he owed money to people who don't wait patiently. Diane was his lifeline, or rather I was. I spent about 2 months gathering every piece of proof, organizing it with Melissa's help, statements, copies, photos, reports, dates, messages, signature comparisons. I didn't sleep right. Food had no taste. And at the same time, I acted like the same old Frank at home, the predictable husband. I made coffee. I asked about her day. I bought supermarket flowers like I was rehearsing normal life. I said, "I love you," with the same mouth that wanted to scream. And Diane answered with practiced sweetness. Acting so well, I started wondering how many times I'd applauded without realizing it. Ray kept showing up too. One night, he came for dinner. I grilled steaks in the backyard the way he liked, and he sat on my porch drinking my beer, telling old stories, laughing loud. At one point, he put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Frank, you're a rare man, loyal, a brother." I looked at that hand and thought of how many times that same hand had touched my wife. I smiled calmly and said, "You too, Ray. You too." Inside, I was counting the days like footsteps to the exit door of a prison. My first move wasn't some dramatic act of revenge. It was leverage. Melissa helped me understand that sometimes the best response is to remove the ground under someone's feet without making a sound. Using a legally created front company, I bought, indirectly, a portion of debt that included some of the loans tied to Ray's business. It didn't happen overnight and it wasn't simple, but big money opens doors you never knew existed. When the change took effect, the deadlines tightened and the payment demands got harsher. Ray panicked. He showed up at my house flushed, sweating, talking fast. "Frank, it's bad. They want full payment now. I'm going to lose everything. I'm done." Diane beside him went pale. It was the first time in a long time I saw her genuinely scared. I stayed quiet for a beat like I was thinking it through and asked, "How much do you need?" Ray swallowed hard. "About $250, like yesterday." I shook my head slowly, wearing the same sad face an honest man wears when he can't help. "I wish I could, Ray, I really do. But you know how tight things are. Retirement doesn't stretch, we barely have breathing room." Diane jumped in, voice soft and sweet. "Frank, we could take out a loan. He's family." I looked at her and thought, "You have the nerve to say family to my face." I answered calmly, "No. I'm not putting the house at risk." Ray left crushed, like I'd slammed the door on his last shelter. Diane barely spoke to me for days. I let her. Her silence felt like a gift. In the months that followed, Ray's life fell apart. Lawsuits, collections, equipment seized, his name dragged through the local community, friends disappearing, the kind of collapse that happens when lies lose their scaffolding, and the bill finally comes due. I watched from a distance with old sadness underneath and a new firmness on top. At the same time, I protected what was mine, reorganized my assets, updated beneficiaries, set aside money for my grandkids, and isolated my finances from any surprise. It wasn't just revenge, it was survival. I wasn't going to leave this story as the old man who ends up without a home, without respect and without peace. I also gathered specific evidence of Diane's financial crimes, because moral betrayal breaks your heart. But fraud is concrete, and courts understand concrete with brutal clarity. The final scene of my plan came on a symbolic day, our 40th wedding anniversary. I told Diane I wanted to do something special, like the old days. She looked suspicious but agreed, maybe because she liked being celebrated while lying. I booked dinner at an upscale place in downtown Grand Rapids called the Willow Room, the kind of restaurant where the server speaks softly and the lighting makes everyone look a little younger. And I said casually, "I invited Ray, and the woman he's been seeing seems serious." Diane blinked fast like she had something in her eye. "Ray, seeing someone?" "Yeah," I said, fussing with my napkin. "Thought it'd be nice. Catch up." There was no woman. What Diane didn't know was that Melissa had flown in and was at the restaurant nearby, along with an experienced local family law attorney and someone to formally document statements and the delivery of certain paperwork. I didn't want a spectacle. I wanted precision. When we arrived, Ray was already seated, thinner, dark circles under his eyes. The last few months had aged him a decade. Diane sat beside me, Ray across the table. We ordered water, and I felt a strange stillness, like the world was waiting for the exact sentence that would split everything open. Before we ordered food, I placed both hands on the table and said, "I've got a few things to say." Diane lifted her wine glass. Ray tried to smile. I continued, "Not long ago I did something I've never done before. I bought a lottery ticket." Diane frowned, confused. "And I won." I watched both their faces shift in the same sequence: confusion, calculation, fear. "I won $9.4 million. Diane's glass trembled. Ray went still like a statue trying to breathe. I let it sit for a second, then added, "I was going to tell you as a surprise, but that day I came home early, and I heard you upstairs." Diane's glass slipped from her fingers and wine spilled across the white tablecloth, a stain you can't unsee. "Frank, I can explain," she started, her voice suddenly rehearsed. I raised a hand, not aggressive, just asking for silence. "No, you can't." Because I didn't just hear one sentence, I heard enough, and then I confirmed everything. I slid a thin folder onto the table, right in the center, like setting down a mirror. "This has the reports, the photos, the bank records, copies of the forged documents, the account under your maiden name, the mortgage I never authorized, and the condo in Gulf Shores." Ray opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Diane looked around like she was searching for an exit. I kept my voice calm. "The original materials are already where they need to be. The rest is with my attorneys. Diane, this isn't just divorce. This involves fraud. Ray, your role is documented too." That's when Melissa approached and stood behind Diane, posture straight, eyes cold. Diane turned, saw her own daughter, and seemed to lose strength. You're with him?" Melissa answered without raising her voice. "I'm with the truth, Mom, and I'm with my father. You made choices for years. Now you live with the consequences." Ray shoved his chair back, jittery. "I'm leaving." I looked at him and said the simplest sentence in the world. "No, you're not." He froze. "There are people outside who want to talk. About money, documents, where funds came from. This isn't family business anymore." Ray sat back down, defeated. Diane started crying, but it wasn't remorse. It was fear. And that's when I learned something bitter. Real remorse has a different sound. It doesn't bargain. I stood, adjusted my jacket, and spoke politely like ending a meeting. "You'll be receiving formal notices. I suggest you find good attorneys." Then I walked out. No yelling, no slammed doors. I didn't look back because looking back would have meant becoming the man they called predictable again. The divorce was finalized a few months later. Diane didn't get what she thought she'd get. Between old agreements, proof of bad faith, and the financial crimes, she lost her chance to bleed me the way she'd planned. She was also required to repay part of the money she'd taken over the years. Ray made a deal in a separate matter and avoided some heavier consequences. But he couldn't escape what hurt him most: his reputation. In a town like ours, a man's name is currency, and his turned to dust. The last I heard, he'd moved farther out and taken overnight work, a long way from the life he pretended to have. Diane moved in with a relative in another town, one of the same people, according to the investigation, who helped keep the lies alive. My family, well, family is where pain and love mix. Ethan was devastated when he learned the truth. He'd always liked Ray, thought of him as a real uncle, but in time he realized the person who chooses to betray doesn't just betray a spouse, they betray the entire story. Melissa, who stood with me from the start, became even more present. And me? After everything, I did the one thing Diane always said she wanted and never truly wanted with me. I started over. I bought a small house on the South Carolina coast, near a quiet stretch where the wind smells like salt and the mornings feel longer. It's not a mansion. It's not about showing off. It's peace. I still wake up early because my body learned that schedule, but now I wake up by choice, not obligation. I drink my coffee watching the sky brighten, and sometimes I just sit there listening to the distant surf like an old radio tuned to a station that only plays calm. I traveled, not to prove anything, but because I finally could, and because I finally understood that putting off life is a polite way of losing it. I went to places I'd only seen in documentaries and never thought I'd set foot in. I walked slow, sat in public squares, ate without rushing, talked to strangers, and learned the world is big, but dignity fits inside a single person. I also set up a simple fund to help kids who want to go to trade school and don't have support. I did it because I came from that same ground, and I know what one chance can change. I went back to fishing too, but now I fish the way people meditate, not the way people run from their pain. I haven't remarried. Not yet. Maybe never. Some wounds don't stop you from walking, but they change the way you step. Sometimes late at night I remember that staircase, that muffled laughter, that word, useful, and I feel a sharp pinch in my chest. But now the pinch doesn't knock me down. It just reminds me of what I learned late, but I learned it. A man's worth isn't measured by how others use him. It's measured by how he respects himself the moment he realizes he's been used. I spent decades being a devoted husband to someone who didn't deserve it, and a loyal friend to a man who smiled while stabbing me in the back. I was naive, yes. I was predictable, yes. But I'm not anymore. And here's the strange part. If I hadn't bought that ticket on impulse, if I hadn't come home at that exact time, I might never have known. I would have lived in peace, in quotes, until the day they decided to drop me, drain me, call me a useless old man, and go live in that beach condo bought with my forged signature. The money mattered, sure, but the truth mattered more. Truth isn't gentle, but it's freeing. Last month, my oldest grandson spent a week with me. He's 9, all energy and curiosity like a flashlight pointed at everything. We built sandcastles, collected shells, argued about which cloud looked like a dog and which looked like a ship. And one night he sat beside me and asked, in that simple way kids cut straight through adult nonsense, "Grandpa, are you okay?" I stayed quiet for a moment. Then I told him the only answer that matters after a certain age. Yeah, I'm okay. Not because nothing hurt, but because I didn't let the hurt decide the rest of my life. And if you're listening to this and you feel trapped in a situation that makes you smaller, hear me with respect. It's not too late. Not at 30, not at 60, not at 70. You can take your voice back. You can take your dignity back. You can step away from the place where you're treated like an object. I'm not a perfect example of anything. I'm proof you can wake up. My name is Frank Miller. I'm 64 years old, and this is the story of how I won the lottery and, at the same time, won the truth. And the truth gave me myself back. Now tell me, what did you think of this story? Do you think I did the right thing by staying calm and strategic? Or would you have confronted them on the spot? Subscribe, hit like, and comment where you're listening from. City, state, or country. Because I really do read them. And I love feeling this conversation crossing distance.